It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's Roy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Updates, the show where I update decks for you, primarily within my range of decks that I play regularly. And I thought it would be fun to take the next few weeks here at the end of the year to go through all of my main decks, all the stuff that I'm testing, talk about them, talk about where they're at, what I've been doing recently, and just talk about why I enjoy them, what I enjoy specifically about them, and how they work. I would love it if you can interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider becoming a member of the channel where you can get access to all the videos early, as well as I would appreciate if you could look at those links in the description below. As always, the deck list is in the description if you're interested. Updated as of dusk morn. I probably won't update the main decks as of Foundations. We'll wait till next year. But today we're talking about, well, what I consider to be my favorite deck, my main deck that's been really put together as a core for the longest, although the commander did change at March of the Machine. And we're talking about Surrak and Goreclaw, a mono green stompy commander, 6 mana, 6/5 with trample. Other creatures we control have trample. And then whenever the non-token creature comes in under our control, we put a counter on it, and it gets haste until end of turn. The reason that this deck changed from Goreclaw, Kalsizma to Surrak and Goreclaw was really haste. The idea that it gives these creatures haste when they come in makes not only a lot of our really big green creatures become more of a threat the turn we get them down, and we're in a deck that's going to be making ramping and getting up there in mana, but this allows us to cheat creatures in cheaply and also have them come in with haste. I think these two things together pair this to be a really explosive deck and things that our opponents have to worry about. And then we'll finish up by talking about, in all reality, what green decks do best, and that's get to stomping. But just like any green deck, like, we have to ramp up, right? I mean, we are not just going to have 6 mana turn 3. We got to get our way up there, and there's plenty of ways to do this. I think Fanatic Aronis is probably one of the best cards that's been printed in the last 6 months for this deck. Coming down for 2 mana, tapping for 1, and then as soon as you get a power 4 creature, greater creature out, taps for 4 green mana. This almost always will get you, once you get Surrak and Goreclaw or another 4 creature down, this will just really just blast you off into the stratosphere of mana. Bighorn Rancher there from Fallout was a card that I had looked at because it's a 5 mana creature, right? 2/5. So a lot of decks are going to say, I'm okay. But remember that with Surrak and Goreclaw, this comes down with haste and can immediately tap for on a green mana equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. And then you can just do that every turn. Then, if you're in real trouble, you sack it to gain life equal to the greatest toughness among other creatures you control. And again, I think Bighorn Rancher in a lot of games comes down immediately tapping for 6 or 7 green mana and allows you to just keep the train rolling. Over there on the right, you have Goreclaw, of course, the original commander of this deck, and still a card that works very well, lessening the cost of creature spells with power 4 or greater, and then giving all creatures we control trample and +1/+1 until end turn when it attacks can be very helpful alongside other things. This also gives us another bit of redundancy of trample, so that it's not just Surrak and Goreclaw that we're worried about as far as trample goes. Gwenna, a mana dork I really like in this deck, so you can tap it to add 2 mana in any combination of colors to only cast creatures or activate creature abilities. But the nice thing is that whenever you cast a creature spell power 5 or greater, you put a counter on it and untap it, meaning that you could potentially get multiple sets of that 2 mana from Gwenna in the course of a turn. Hulking Raptor is great, coming in for 4 mana and then adding 2 green at each of your main phase 1s, right? Each of your first main phase of every turn. This is a really nice one on turn 3 after a Fanatic Aronis if you kind of just get yourself into the stratosphere of mana. But Hulking Raptor is great because it's a good body and it's giving you 2 mana every turn. Nylea Keen-Eyed kind of plays a similar role to Goreclaw, reducing the cost of all creature spells by 1. We pair Nylea with things like Ronus's Monument, which reduces the cost of all green creatures by 1, and then Emerald Medallion, just reducing all green spells by 1. And you can start to build this a little bit of reduction package for your creature spells and your green spells, if possible. Selvala is another great mana dork. Tapping for X mana for 1 green, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Again, the bigger your creatures get, the more mana you're getting. And then you have the ability to draw cards if when a creature comes in, it has more power than anything else. 5 mana Vorinclex is something that's played really well in the deck. When it comes in, you get up to 2 forest cards, put them into your hand. This is nice because then you have more land drops to play. Or if you have something that cheats and lands from your hand, you can do that. But it's a 6/6 body for 5. Remember, if Goreclaw's out, Goreclaw Terra Calcisma is out, this is just throw a 3 mana 6/6. But even at a 5 mana 6/6, it's well worth it. I don't very often flip Vorinclex over to the backside, but a 6/6 body for 5 mana that also has a reach is really nice. And then Whisper of the Wilds, this classic 1 mana dork that can tap for 2 if you have a creature with power 4 or greater, is just really useful as we get to the mid and late game. But alright, we'll talk about the big boys, the thing we're trying to cast. Apex Devastator kind of plays a twofold role in this deck. It should really belong in either this category or the cheating creatures in category. But it's a 10 mana 10/10 with quadruple cascade. And remember that with Surrak and Goreclaw, any creature that comes in gets that haste. I've seen Apex Devastator potentially, I've seen it end a game at least twice, and I've seen it knock multiple players out just on its cascades alone when you start dumping massive green creatures onto the battlefield. Remember, you're cascading at 10, so a lot of this deck falls underneath that. Of course, one of our favorite green finishers in Craterhoof falls underneath that as well, but a quadruple cascade at 10 mana hits a lot of our deck and allows us to take a big turn. Defiler of Vigor is something I really enjoy. Whenever you go to cast a green permanent spell, you can pay 2 life instead of 1 of the green pips on that card, and gives a little bit of a cost reduction. But whenever you cast a green permanent spell, you just put a counter on every creature you control. This is just going to start, right, raising that water level and making all of our creatures harder to deal with. Emergent Windworm might actually be one of my favorite new adds to the deck over the last year or so, because I think its ability is just really crucial. So it comes down, and it has backups. You can pick it when it comes in, you can put 3 counters on a creature. If that's another creature than the Woodworm, it gets its bottom ability till end of turn. I love using Woodworm on Surrak and Goreclaw specifically because you get the following effect really twice, right? 1 for the Woodworm and 1 for the Goreclaw. But when a creature attacks, you look at the top X cards of your library where X is its power. You can put a permanent with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield, and then put the rest on the bottom. This is a great ability because this means that if you just have Woodworm and Surrak and Goreclaw, you're looking for 9 and you're looking for 5 off the top, and it's not going to be very hard to get 2 really nice key pieces right off the top to take real advantage of that ability. It'd be nice if it wasn't on attack, right, because then you could potentially have more creatures to hit with, but again, you're just setting up your board to be even better. It's always nice when you hit something like an old Gnawbone or something that just generates a realistically huge value off of that, and it just gets better and better. Hydra Omnivore just came back into the deck a set or two ago. See here, it's got a nice reprint in the Duskmoor Commander decks, but it's a card that I have yet to use in a game with it since I put it in, but I think once I do, it's going to hit hard. It says when it deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to each other opponent. If you think about it, Omnivore is going to come down as a 9/9 with Surrak and Goreclaw's ability. If you have no other way to buff it, it could ideally knock multiple players out at once, depending on how big it is, and that's the kind of threats we want in the deck. O'Hare Kaslam was a great add from Lost Caverns Vixalan. Whenever it hits a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library. You can put a creature and or a land from among them onto the battlefield, put the rest on the bottom. This is a brutal ability because we're at minimum going to hit a land. We have enough lands in the deck that every time that I've hit someone with Kaslam, I've at least gotten a land. But we're probably going to end up getting a creature as well, and it's just going to put so much value on the board. Railway Brawler felt right, no TJ. 5/5 for 5, which is a great rate. But whenever another creature comes in, you put counters on it equal to its power, and that 1/1 counter that comes in with Surrak and Goreclaw will count for that. What I like with this deck is that as time has gone on, we've gotten things like Railway Brawler from OTJ. It's becoming more and more about those +1/+1 counters that Surrak and Goreclaw puts on, and we can really take advantage of some of the counter sub-synergies. Thunderfoot Bailiff just feels right, +2/+2 and trample for all our creatures as long as we control our commander. Again, the more damage we hit our opponents for, the harder it's going to be our opponents to live very long in the game when we're hitting them really hard every time we hit. And you combine that with big creatures like we see here over on the right in 2 of the 3 Ulamogs that are legal in the format. And both of these Unlogs are in here because they both can come down with haste because of Surrak and Goreclaw, but they also just have really good abilities, right? Ceaseless Hunger exiles 2 permanents on cast, and when it attacks, you start nuking your opponent's libraries. Ulamog the Defiler, right, comes in and when you cast it, target opponent exiles half their library rounded up. It comes with a number of counters on it equal to the greatest mana value among cards in exile. And then remember, it's going to come in with a counter because it's Surrak and Goreclaw. So it's going to end up having a pretty massive Annihilator when it goes to attack. And it's going to be very difficult for our opponents to deal with something like Ulamog the Defiler, especially when you add extra counters to it with other abilities. Volpor Tyrant was exactly what we wanted as well out of OTJ. This is another copy of the classic whenever a creature comes in, draw a card abilities, but it says whenever it or another creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life and draw a card, which is even better. We will take it, and then not only that, but Tyrant says that when it dies, you bring it back as a token copy of it, except it's an artifact, which is not bad for 7 mana, right? The deck is playing the other 2 Vorinclexes. We're playing Monstrous Raider because our deck does care about counters, so we can actually get extra counters. And I really like the play of denying your opponents those counters as well. Vorinclex is a body they then have to deal with, taking away potentially some removal from some of our other creatures that could be really important, and they have to use it on Monstrous Raider to get their kind of game plans back. And then Vorinclex Voice of Hunger, as much as I don't like the card sometimes, it's very good at what it does. It gives us double mana, and it starts shutting down our opponents. They're forced to deal with it. And it's not a bad body, right? Having trample on its own. But how do we cheat stuff in? Because at the end of the day, we don't want to just hard cast everything. Remember that everything comes in with haste, whether it's cast or not. I think the biggest example of, as of late, what we got is something like Galta Stampede Tyrant. When it comes in, put a number of creatures from your hand on the battlefield, just brutal. Just dump a bunch of creatures in, take a big attack. I really like Eladamri from Modern Horizons 3. This didn't actually come in after Modern Horizons 3. I think I kind of overlooked it. And when Bloomburrow came out, I went back for the updates again. And I was like, I think this makes more sense because you can cast creatures off the top, but then you tap it and tap 2 untapped creatures you control to reveal a card from your hand or the top of your library. If it's a creature card, put it on the battlefield. Well, there may be a world where you have mana dorks sitting around that, we don't need the mana from, or maybe we make a spare token or 2 and we don't need the mana from them. Well, tap it, you tap Eladamri, and you get something big onto the battlefield. Combat of the East Tree makes a ton of sense whenever a permanent comes in. If it wasn't put on the battlefield with this ability, you could put a permanent with equal or lesser mana value from your hand on the battlefield. I mean, if you're casting something for 8, right, if something with 8 comes in, now you're putting something down for free in your hand. There's the Magic Christmas Land world with Kadamda East Tree, where we get to use spells like these guys to put big things onto the battlefield, creatures, and then be able to put enchantments or artifacts right from our hand out on the battlefield that are mana value less. But these 3 cards tend to cause some fun. You have things like Last March of the Ents, an 8 mana spell that can't be countered. Draw cards equal to the greatest toughness among creatures you control and put any number of creatures from your hand on the battlefield. I have not won a game that I have not yet lost a game that I have resolved Last March of the Ents in, especially with Surrak and Goreclaw out, because it's very difficult when you're drawing 9 or 10 cards to deal with that many creatures at once, unless your opponents have a way to do it right at instant speed. See the Unwritten. Not as good as the Ents, but you're going to look at the top 8, put creatures from among them from your hand on the battlefield. If you have Ferocious, so if you have a creature power 4 or greater, you get 2 instead of 1. And we almost always want to do this with Surrak out, so that we get that haste, almost always getting 2. And then no mana value restrictions, so you're just going to dump 2 massive things on the battlefield. And then Natural Order is a card I really like. So you have to sack a green creature in order to cast it, go get a green creature, put it on the battlefield. There's 2 ways to look at this. You have the classic Craterhoof, right? Example where you go get Craterhoof, bring it down and win that way. But I also really like Natural Order for that Galta that dumps your hand onto the battlefield, because let's say you have a couple really big creatures in your hand and you have a Natural Order. Well, get rid of one of your mana dorks, go get a Galta, dump your hand onto the battlefield, and now you've basically done this Last March See the Unwritten style play just with 1 creature, and that's why it's really important. I used to run Savage Order as well, but the problem is I don't have a ton of dinosaurs in the deck, so it ends up being kind of a feels bad, whereas Natural Order is going to always hit because every single creature in my deck is green, so I don't have to worry about that. Smuggler's Surprise from OTJ is a card that I think makes a ton of sense. You can give all your creatures with power 4 or greater hexproof and indestructible for 2 mana, but for 6 mana you can just put 2 creatures from your hand on the battlefield, kind of that See the Unwritten style of effect, to just put 2 key things down. And then Monstrous Vortex, we're casting a ton of really big creatures, so we're going to almost always be able to discover X really well, and again, continue to cheat big things in. So we talked about cheating things in. Well, let's talk about doing the green thing. Let's stomp it up. So we got things like Craterhoof, of course, the classic mono green finisher. It's good at what it does, and we love it for it. Enrage Forerunners is another one of my favorites. Kind of a mini one, but comes in and gives everything +2/+2 vigilance and trample until end of turn. Still a good buff. Vigilant helps with blocking on the back end, and you're still going to deal a ton of damage. I knew the second I saw Nissus and an Animist out of Phyrexia LB1, it was for this deck. The +1 makes you a big creature token, where X is its loyalty, but the -7 gives all your creatures +1/+1 in trample until end of turn for each forest you control. We don't play a ton of non-forest lands in this deck, meaning you're almost always going to have a ton of them laying around, and this is basically Triumph for the Hordes at what it, or a Craterhoof at what it does. Triumph for the Hordes, these overwhelming stampede style effects. It's going to hurt your opponents when you do it. God Eternal Ronus, when it comes in, doubles the power of each other creature we control till end of turn, and they gain vigilance. This is a great ability because then it won't get the double, but it's going to double everything else and still be able to attack as a 6/6 right that turn with Surrak and Goreclaw. Having Death Touch, of course, works really well with Trample, so it's an ability that we want to try to get whenever we can. Kamal, Heart of Krosa. Beginning your combat on our turn, everybody gets +3/+3 in trample. Just a great way to continue getting these buffs on our board and getting them rocking. Pathbreaker Ibex, whenever it attacks, everybody we control gets +X/+X in trample, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Again, just brutal and becomes very hard for our opponents to deal with. Zopandrel and Unnatural Growth, both going to double the power and toughness of our creatures at the start of combat. Again, a great way to just get more and more and more damage across to our opponents. As far as the recent things we added to the deck, Duskmourn didn't bring a lot as much as I expected to the deck, in the sense that the one card I did really put in there was just like reprints. But I think the couple cards really recently that became really important were Innkeeper's Talent from Bloomborough, because we're putting counters on those creatures, and Innkeeper's Talent can put counters on creatures. I think that Ward 1 does become really important. We talked about Smogo's Surprise, putting creatures down. Sereth was always had in the considering board, but the more I thought about them, the more it makes sense. I've always had Ore and Frostfang in the deck, which gives creatures Death Touch and draws you cards when you hit. But I realized that Death Touch makes a ton of sense with Trample, because you just start really hurting your opponents quickly. And if I have an 8/8 and you block me with a creature, now I can trample through for 7, right, with Death Touch, and I think that math really starts to add up as far as what you want to do. You can also give another thing hexproof, right, by untapping it. But I like this type of effect, and I think having more Death Touch around is important. But I say it on the show all the time, and I genuinely mean it for my own decks as well. No deck's ever perfect. Although I've had this deck for a long time and I've gone through a lot of iterations, there's still things that I'm looking for. There's still things that I'm considering. And in this season of testing after Duskmourn, these are the 3 cards that I'm targeting for the deck. Evercoat Ursine is a creature I love the idea of. A 5-mana 6/5 that comes down as a 7/6. You get double Hideaway 3, so when it comes in, you look at the top 3, exile 1 face down for it, so you get to do that twice. Then whenever it hits a player, you get to cast one of them without paying their mana cost. It feels like everything this deck wants, but the problem that I've run into with Surrak and Goreclaw so far over time is that there's always new things to try, and there's not always a key creature that makes sense to take out for that slot. So it can be tough sometimes, and I'm trying my best to fit it in a spot, and I think I will eventually. Contest of Claws is a card that I've got to play with in other decks. I really like it. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature. If excess damage was dealt this way, you discover X, where X is that damage. There's no world where this doesn't feel good. We have things like Galta running around that are at 12 power that can turn Contest of Claws and probably discover 9 or 10. I think the card just makes a ton of sense. I just don't know physically what to take out for it. This and Season of Gathering to the right of it are 2 cards that I love the idea of them. What do I take out? I really like Season of Gathering because we don't play a ton of artifacts other than Emerald Medallion and Ronus's Monument and the Great Henge. I mean, all 3 of those artifacts are great, but I mean, those are the only 3 we play. We play more enchantments than that, but the idea just to nuke all artifacts on the board that isn't going to hurt us feels really good while giving some counters out to our creatures. We could also draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures we control, which isn't bad. I mean, think about it. There is a world where you could, if you had enough mana, Season of the Gathering into something like Last March of the Ents or Galta and just dump a giant hand of creatures, right? I mean, I like Season of Gathering a ton. I can't figure out how to maneuver it into the deck to work Well, but let's get a playtest or two in, and we'll talk about having some fun. A 3-lander here with See the Unwritten, Vaultborn Tyrant, Hydra Omnivore, and Fanatic Aronis. Fanatic Aronis is a card we always want to see because it works really darn well for our game plan. So we'll get it down here, turn 2. Probably no turn 3 play as it sits, but okay, so we see Sereth. So the question is, well, Sereth doesn't turn on the Ferocious. Would we rather up the Beanstalk try to hit something else, or do we just Sereth and protect Fanatic Aronis, right, with the Hexproof? I kind of think that might be right. Give it Hexproof so nobody can remove it, right, because we really want it. Now on turn here, on turn 4, we're at 5 mana. I'll use it to play that Nissa Who Shakes the World. Love Frog Nissa. Love getting a new copy of it. We'll tick it up and make this into a 3/3. And the cool part is because it did untap, we can use its mana to play this up the Beanstalk, drawing a card when it comes in, and now we can get some card draw going. But the cool part is now our forest tap for 2 instead of 1. So next turn we'll be able to go off potentially and have a big turn. Turn 5 here, so we've got 2, 4, 6, 8 mana, but remember we can untap one of them with Nissa. So we technically have 10 mana. But remember that Fanatic Aronis is going to tap for 4 once we play a creature. So I would probably go 2, 4, 6. Cast Surrak and Goreclaw. We're going to get an Up the Beanstalk trigger to draw a card. Then Surrak and Goreclaw is going to come in. We'll untap another one of our forests, right? So we've got 2, 4, and now 8, right, with Fanatic Aronis, which is pretty darn helpful when you think about it that way. We can do a lot of different things. We could go with Bighorn here first because it's going to come in and immediately be able to tap for mana. We could do the See the Unwritten if we want to. I mean, I love the idea of Monstrous Raider, but I think what makes the most sense is get Bighorn Rancher down. That is a mana 5 value spell, so we're going to draw a card. Now we can tap the Bighorn Rancher for 6 to play that, Vorinclex, which is going to come in with 2 counters, but we're going to draw off of the Up the Beanstalk. And I think we still have 4 mana left over, but I don't think there's anything we can do with it because we tapped the 6 floating 1 for Bighorn Rancher. I actually think we have 5, right? I think we have 5. So we've got a good attack going here. Goreclaw won't have haste this turn, but everything else will, right? 5, so the idea is Kaslam or God Eternal Ronis. Kaslam makes the most sense just because we could potentially get some value here, right? When it swings in this turn, it's going to get 2 counters, right, because of that Vorinclex. And now we go to combat. You take an attack, Vorinclex and Ohir Kaslam. And Kaslam's guaranteed to hit, right, and get us something off the top. And then next turn, I mean, we just, Ronus plus, anything else we find is just going to be game. I think you can kind of see where we're working for there. So let's go into playtest number 2, keeping a 3-lander with Nykthos, Rampant Growth for some ramp, Nylea for some reduction, Apex Devastator, and Kamala. So I like it. We got good starts here. We'll get that forest in turn 1. Turn 2, we see Sylvan Tutor. I know this is going to probably make some people, everybody has their opinion of tutors. What I traditionally try to do with Sylvan Tutor is just use it to get pieces like Goreclaw or Hulking Raptor. I always try to find the rampy pieces instead of getting the Crater Hoofs of the world. You know what I mean? I think I'm just going to go for the Rampant Growth here. So that way we can play Nylea here on turn 3. Ooh, or we play Hulking Raptor here on turn 3. Ooh, both are great options. I'll play the Hulking Raptor instead just because Ward 2, so it means it's probably guaranteed to stick around. So now on turn 4, we get double green with the Hulking Raptor, right? And I think we might as well just get Surrak and Goreclaw down. I think this is just going to end up staying untapped, but that's a-okay. Now next turn on turn 5 we're going to start off with 5, 6, 7 mana, but we can get it into the Nykthos for more. So what I always try to do with Nykthos is see if we can get enough things down before we activate Nykthos to get good value. So if I pay 4 for Nylea here, right, Nylea actually does come in as a creature. But so that's 4, and then I could turn Hulking Raptor's 2 mana into 5, right? I don't really have anything good for 5 though, but I could, right, if I wanted to do that. I guess we'll go Sylvan Tutoring. I'm trying to figure out what it is exactly that I want here. I mean, the obvious answer is something like, Craterhoof or something big. We have Ulamog, right, which next turn we're 1 mana off Ulamog, right, being able to give us something, being able to Ulamog, but we can do something, or again, we're close. I say no, it costs 1 less, so we can do Ulamog or Apex Devastator next turn. So, I mean, really, in all reality, we just want to put something on top that we want to draw. Galta could be fun, just so that way we can dump our hand, right, then the next turn. So we draw here for turn 6, 4, 2 into this for 5, so that's 9. And I think it makes more sense to Apex Devastator than it does Ulamog, especially if Surrak survives, because this is potentially up to 5 creatures coming in instead of just 1 with the Ulamog and the trigger. So we would cascade for 4 times for 10. So the first cascade hits Aladomri. Aladomri comes in with a counter on it. Second cascade, Selvala. So now Selvala can actually potentially tap for mana. Third one gets us a Survival of the Fittest, a card that can allow us to discard creatures to go get creatures of our choice. And then the fourth one is Whisper of the Wilds. So now we could put Whisper of the Wilds into Selvala to get more, right, to get more mana this turn. And what this is going to end up doing is basically allowing me to put, Apex Devastator will draw me a card off of the Selvala because it's at 11 power. And now basically what I can do is put the Whisper of the Wilds mana into Selvala to get 11, and basically just play Galta, right? Galta comes in, and it's actually going to draw me a card off of Selvala, which I'll do first just in case we hit another creature. But then basically I get to just dump these 3 in with Galta, right? And now Ibex is basically going to lead to lethal here because Kamal's +3. Ibex is going to give everything, +13, +13. So we're going into a combat where we're getting +16 with trample to our board. And, I mean, this is just going to be brutal, right? I don't know how this table survives. If somebody does manage to fog this, they have to then wipe the board, right? Otherwise, they're just dead. This is what Goreclaw does so well, and why I think it's a fun deck sometimes to play, because it can just take these turns where you're brutalizing even without Craterhoof. Look at just what that Galta alone off that Apex Devastator, just enough mana did. But let me know. What do you think of Surrak and Goreclaw down in the comment section below? I love this deck. I love playing it. I'll never get bored of it. I really do truly enjoy it. And I'm excited to keep updating it as time goes on. So I'd love to know what you think in the comment section below, and I'll catch you guys next time.